On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we talk about the world's most contested choke point. That's right, the Bab el-Mandeb. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, for almost a year now, we have been talking about the Houthi attacks against commercial shipping in and around the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and that magical strait that connects the two, the Bab el-Mandeb. We're going to discuss a new announcement coming out from the head of the International Maritime Organization, updates on this region, along with some new information regarding attacks being perpetrated against shipping nearly a year after this all started with that dramatic attack on the Galaxy Leader back on November 17th of 2023. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. So here we have this story over at G-Captain Mike Scholler. Red Sea Crisis. The IMO, International Maritime Organization Chief Secretary General Ernesto Dominguez, calls for urgent action as Houthi attacks threaten global shipping. I really have to raise a question with the IMO about urgent action. We're a year into these attacks, and now we're calling for urgent action. I think we need to reset the IMO watches. I know we just set back an hour here in the United States for daylight savings time, but it appears as if the IMO may be a year behind. The crisis began with the attack on the Galaxy Leader, as we mentioned before, but the attacks have gone on since then. To date, we have 4 fatalities, 2 ship sinkings, the Ruby Mar and the Tudor, along with attacks on at least 105 vessels. According to Secretary General Dominguez, the continuous attacks on ships and seafarers in the Red Sea are endangering innocent human lives, affecting the entire shipping industry and therefore global security. Global economy. Let's be clear. The Houthi are attacking ships they initially said were connected to Israel. Galaxy Leader, perfect example. Owned and operated by ray carriers. A pair of Israelis own the vessel. So they attacked that ship because of the Israeli attack into Gaza, which again was caused by the Hamas attack out of Gaza into Israel, which we can go back to 1948 and the partition of Israel. We could go back 5,000 years to the Babylonians and the original Israelis. This is the way this conversation usually goes, and I'm sure it will be in the comments down below. However, the Houthi attacks have broadened out since then. They've attacked ships that have no connection to Israel, and as a matter of fact, as we'll see here, they are making allegations of new attacks with ships that are not even connected at all to Israel. What has been the impact of these attacks? Well, let's go ahead and look at some charts. These are vessels at the Suez Canal as of the beginning of January of 2023 up until the present day. Can you tell on the chart where the Houthi attack started? Yeah, right here, the big huge cliff where we saw the weekly transits go down from about 220 ships a week down to about 120 ships per week. When you look at the percentage and change of year-to-year transits, overall transits are down 40%. In terms of car carriers, almost 95%, containers over 50%, crude tankers just about 30%, dry bulkers 40%, LNG carriers 80%, LPG, liquefied petroleum gas tankers 30%, and product tankers 25%. The magic number here is $100 million. If your shipping cargo is worth more than $100 million, you're going to divert around Africa, because at a roughly 1% war risk insurance cost, it is more economical to take your ship around Africa than it is to sail through, pay for the Suez Canal toll, and risk your vessel. Understand, the issue here really isn't risk. No one's really concerned about the Houthis hitting things because they don't hit things too often. They have, but we talked about 100 ships over the course of a year, talking about 17 to 18,000 ships usually go through the Red Sea annually. So it's a pretty low percentage of ships going through. Plus, we are seeing escorts going through. The European Union's Operation Aspides is escorting certain vessels through. CMA CGM has the Phoenician Express going through. But what we're seeing right now are indications that this may be going on a bit longer. This story from Reuters: Houthis say they will not end Red Sea blockade. Yemen's Houthi said on Sunday they will maintain their maritime blockade against Israeli vessels in response to intelligence information regarding Israeli shipping companies selling their assets to other companies. The Iran-aligned Houthis have said that they are intensifying their attacks to support Hamas and Hezbollah in their resistance against Israeli actions in the region. Now, understand the Houthis have expanded their attacks. They've gone through a series of phases. They started attacking U.S. and United Kingdom owned vessels, ironically because the U.S. and U.K. were defending vessels that were attacked by the Houthi, including U.S. UK owned vessels. And so they initiated attacks against the Houthi. Now the Houthi say they're going to attack more U.S. UK vessels. This is, if you're confused, don't be alone. This is what the Red Sea has turned into. Then the argument is any ships that are connected at all to having gone to Israel, this is the 6 degrees of separation that the Houthis use as their argument. They're saying we're going to attack them. They've attacked vessels, for example, whose companies have sent ships into Israel at some time in the past, and therefore they target them. And then you get this story out over in Maritime Executive. Houthi forces threaten to target ex-Israeli ships even after Resale. The story has this statement from the Houthi spokesman, Yahya Saree, my favorite guy in the world. I just, when he's at that podium, clutching that podium in his outfit, he's got to smile a little bit more. He's a bit dour guy. But he said the group believes Israeli shipping interests are taking steps to hide their ships' true ownerships in order to evade the punitive measures that Houthi forces have imposed in the Red Sea. He goes on to say, the Yemeni armed forces will not take into consideration any change in ownership of flags of the ships of the Israeli enemy and warns all concerned parties dealing with these companies or ships are subject to punishment. This is also a fantastic way for them to target any ship that they don't know the ownership over. Quite a number of ships attacked by the Houthi that have no connection whatsoever to Israel, the United Kingdom, or the United States. According to the UK Maritime Trade Office, along with the Joint Maritime Information Center, about 55% of all ships that have been attacked by the Houthi, no connection to either of those three. And those ships that are just connected to Israel, about 29%. So, 3 times out of 10, the Houthi are targeting ships that are connected to the Houthi. Now, we're talking about trade disruptions. We're talking about issues with ships going longer routes around Africa. Surely the shipping companies are in arms about this. No. This story, Maersk rides wave of strong demand and Red Sea disruptions. Mike Scholler, G-Captain, Maersk, the global shipping giant, has reported strong third quarter performance, driven by the strong market demand and ongoing instability in the Red Sea. The preliminary Q3 third quarter results are in, reporting a revenue of $15.8 billion and an EBITDA, I know there's a way to say that and I never get it right, of $4.8 billion and an underlying EBIT of $3.3 billion, all significantly higher than the year's figures. That's basically profits we're talking about there. Vincent Clerc, the CEO at Maersk, said this quarter we once again supported our customers through times of high volatility and low visibility. We reaffirmed our commitment to profitable growth and operational progress, driving results across all business areas through continued rigorous focus on cost discipline, productivity gains, and efficient asset utilization. Let's be clear. The ocean carriers are not upset about the diversions around the Red Sea. They are putting more ships on service. Remember, they were about to have a glut of shipping out there. This has jacked up freight rates for them. They are doing very well. The Q3 has been phenomenal for them. And what we're seeing right now is that there is really no demand to do that. Matter of fact, Maersk and Hapag in their new Gemini Corporation have just put out their proposed routes, and all of their routes are going around Africa. The only major container lines that are going through right now are select ships of CMA CGM because they're getting the protection afforded to them by the Marine Nationale, the French Navy, and the European Union. Now, I should note that not all navies are even sailing through this region. The most disturbing story was this one. John Conrad wrote this over at G-Captain. The Red Sea is now so dangerous, even NATO warships are avoiding it. The Red Sea, once one of the world's busiest, most strategically vital waterways, has become so hazardous that the German Navy is steering clear. A German frigate, the Baden-Württemberg, and its support ship, Frankfurt am Main, great names, German names, are going around the Cape of Good Hope on their return from the Indo-Pacific deployment, and that speaks volumes. Now, the German Navy is making the argument that Baden-Württemberg is not designed for air defense, so therefore they don't want to send it through. But this is a bad, bad image. The fact that the Germans are not sending ships through this, German naval vessels through this area, is bad enough. The U.S. isn't sending vessels through this area. Commercial vessels or ships of the Maritime Security Program. Yes, U.S. naval warships are still sailing and transiting the area, but not commercial vessels. But here we have the German Navy not sailing through, and that is not a good look. That is 9 for the German Navy. At the same time, a question I get asked all the time is like, hang on a minute, Sal. The Europeans should be worried about what's going on in their backyard, but you know who should really be worried about this? Egypt. Egypt should be worried about it. Well, Egypt reveals a $6 billion revenue hit as the Houthis vow to up campaign against shipping. Now, there was just an announcement the other day about the Egyptians and the Saudis putting together a naval force to patrol the northern Red Sea. However, you are not going to see the Egyptians and the Saudis go against the Houthi. Question is why? Sal, if the Egyptians are losing $6 billion, understand on a yearly average, the Suez Canal produces $10 billion for the Egyptians. Why are they not doing anything? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, Egypt is one of the few countries in the world that recognize the Houthi as a legitimate government. So Egypt can't really go against the Houthis. Second, Egypt has Gaza on its border. This is the region that the Houthis are upset about because the Israelis are going in, bombing the area, and killing people. And, again, I'm not going to get into the politics here because, Hamas has abducted people. The Israelis are bombing, civilian areas. This is a nasty conflict. This is war. It is absolutely horrendous. But Egypt is not going to go attack the Houthis because if they attack the Houthis, then they appear to be on the side of the Israelis. And with Gaza on their border, that is not a look the Egyptians want. More importantly, they don't want Hamas targeting Egypt. All Hamas would have to do is turn some of their rockets 180 and start raining rockets on the Suez Canal. And while the Egyptians are losing $6 billion, they're still making $4 billion. They don't want to lose that last $4 billion. And so Egypt's got to be very careful. Plus, Hezbollah up in Lebanon, Iran, they don't want targeting of the Suez Canal. Egypt needs what ships are coming through. You're still getting 60% of the vessels going through the Suez Canal, arguably the lower tiered vessels, not the high-end vessels. You're not getting the large vessels, expensive vessels over $100 million going. But Egypt has got to play a very careful, measured response here. At the same time, the Saudis, who have fought the Houthi for 10 years, don't want to get back into that mess. And so they're avoiding it. So all of this is a mess. Add to it, hey, let's throw another player into this. Let's throw Russia. This story over in the Wall Street Journal, Russia provides targeting data for Houthi assault on global shipping. Moscow's assistance in attacks that are disrupting trade shows how the Kremlin's seeking to tie up the U.S. in the Middle East. I'm going to have a link to that story. It's a great story for you to take a look at. But when you get down to it, it is vital. Russia provides targeting data for the Yemen's Houthi as they attack Western ships. Goes on here, the assistance, which hadn't been previously reported, shows how far Russian President Putin is willing to go to undermine the U.S.-led Western economic and political order. Russia, in this case, supporting the Iran-backed Houthis, which the U.S. designated as a terrorist group, as they carried out a series of attacks in one of the world's most heavily traveled shipping routes. The Russians providing targeting information to the Houthi is key. We know that they were getting information provided by Iran for a long time. We saw Iranian vessels, the Blockade was in the region, but now we're getting the image that the Russians are providing this. And what we do know is a lot of Russian ships are sailing through this region and are able to pass. Now, sometimes the Houthi do hit Russian ships, let's be clear. I think that goes more to the fact that the Houthi don't know who they're shooting at sometimes. But we do know that this is in the advantageous position for the Russians because of support that the U.S. and the West is giving to Ukraine. This is a way for Russia to hit back at the U.S. Plus, you have the G7, the EU, doing economic sanctions against Russian shipping. You've got price caps on diesel and oil. You've got the creation of the shadow parallel fleet that's going on. We are really not paying attention to the maritime dimension of the war that is being fought here right now. The conflict in and around the Bab el-Mandeb, the conflict up in the Black Sea, even what China is doing out in the South China Sea. This is all part of a larger issue regarding freedom of the seas and navigation. The other element of Russia goes back to an allegation that came out very early in these attacks, way back in January of 2024. This story over at G-Captain: Houthi bribe allegations rock the shipping market. There were allegations put out by Shipping Watch, which is a Danish maritime news service, that was talking about that some of the shipping firms may have been paying off the Houthis. Now, this was immediately denied by the major shipping firms. Everybody said that we weren't doing this. This is not happening. We're definitely not doing it. I reported a few months ago looking at tracking of vessels coming through the Red Sea. Now, these are not the major shipping lines. These are Russian ships, Chinese ships. There was an indication that ships were stopping before going through the contested area, both the southern Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. I was hearing rumors from many sources that I would tell you are very good sources, that Russians and other shipping firms were paying off the Houthi. They were literally waiting for boats to come out and dropping bags of money into it. Well, guess what? We get this story over in Lloyd's List. Houthis' threat to shipping growing thanks to unprecedented network of support. Houthis reported to be earning an estimated $180 million a month from illegal safe transit fees paid by unnamed shipping agents to secure safe passage through the Red Sea. Richard Mead over in Lloyd's List has this story outside the paywall so you can take a look at it. The threat posed to global shipping lanes by the Houthi is growing dramatically thanks to an increasingly diverse network of political alliances, military suppliers, and financial support networks. Goes on, according to a UN panel of experts report seen by Lloyd's List, the Houthi have benefited from training and technically helped by the Quds Force, the foreign operations arm of Iran. Financial networks now extend across multiple jurisdictions, including Djibouti, Iran, and Turkey, using various banks, shell companies, financial facilitators, and shipping companies. Houthi spokesman announced on Sunday that the Yemen rebel group would maintain its maritime blockade against Israeli shipping in response to intelligence information regarding Israeli shipping companies selling their assets to other companies. The UN panel of experts said, which had been circulated among government intelligence services by the UN Security Council, but has not been made public, also confirms recent intelligence indicating that the Houthis are strengthening ties with the resurgent terrorist group al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula and al-Shabaab in Somalia. So, the gang's back together again. All the old ones we saw during the global war of terror are now coming up into this area. Now, the UN report looked at the period from September of 2023 up until July of 2024, and they're making the allegation that there's a lot of effort going into these attacks. It's more than just the Houthis shooting missiles. It is intelligence networks, it's terrorist organizations. And let me be clear, I am always suspicious when we start sounding the terrorist siren. I live in the United States. I've watched 20 years of conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan. But what we do know is that shipping is being targeted, and the amount of attacks being done right now are sufficient enough to drive most of shipping out of the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, the Bab el-Mandeb, around Africa. What is going through the region, 60% of the shipping that's remaining, tend to be local shipping and shipping that is earmarked for Russia, China, India, Iran, basically the non-aligned states. If you're a member of the G7, the EU, that are imposing price sanctions, if you're part of the alliance of the United States against the Houthi, your ships are being targeted. And most importantly, if you're Israeli, you're being targeted. That's what we see. We're definitely starting to see this issue, and I've talked about it repeatedly here, about the freedom of the seas being challenged. Go back to this Lloyd's List report. While the UN panel has not been able to independently verify this information, sources estimate that the Houthis' earnings from these illegal safe transits may be about $180 million per month. The alleged payments of fees is not direct interaction between the growing Houthi operation and shipping companies. According to the report, the Houthi-controlled companies are importing oil and liquefied petroleum gas using false country of origin certificates through the ports of Yemen, sometimes bypassing inspections by the UN verification and inspection mechanism. It occurs in two ways. Some vessels travel to specified countries, turning off their AIS transponders, while others conduct ship-to-ship transfers at sea without violating the ports indicated in the country of origin. I still think there are bags of money also being tossed off to pay off. Overall, the UN panel concludes that Yemen's Houthi rebels are transforming themselves, quote, into a powerful military organization due to unprecedented military support from outside sources. The danger here is not the Houthi, is that this can be happening in other maritime choke points around the world. What happens if there's a group in Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines that want to choke off the Malacca Strait where 23% of the world shipping goes through, or the Sunda or the Lombok Strait or the South China Sea or any other kind of narrow little waterway? Right now we're seeing it being done in the Bab el-Mandeb. Cheers. This is the concern we should be having. All those factors are playing in. We're a year almost from the seizure of the Galaxy Leader. And unfortunately, what we've seen is really a disjointed, disorganized response to the Houthi. You had the U.S. going strong, Eisenhower Battle Group, USS Carney, USS Mason, going in and whacking drones out of the air left and right, shooting $1 billion worth of missile and ordnance into the air until the Eisenhower had to go back home and redeploy. And the decision was made, we're going to turn this over to the European Union, Operation of Speeds, which is a handful of lesser capable warships and vessels. And basically what they're doing is feeding several ships through on convoys. For the United States, since January of 2024, no U.S. flagged commercial vessels have gone through the region. They are being diverted around. You've got the German Navy sailing around. This is not good. You are allowing the Houthis to claim ownership over an area of international waters that, under UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, Article 19, is the right of innocent passage. There's no question that innocents are being killed. Innocents are killed in war, in every war in human history. However, the issue here is whether or not the Houthi, who are not the recognized government of Yemen, I know they own the capital, and I know countries have recognized them, but the UN and many countries around the world don't recognize them. They are they're alleging that they have control over that region, and they don't. However, there are areas of the world's ocean that other nations are claiming too. The Danes are arguing that they have the right to inspect vessels coming through the Danish Straits. The Turks have that weird relationship with the Turkish Straits under the Montreux Convention. Even the Canadians are making arguments over the Northwest Passage that they control. Some places make claims over pieces of waters that they don't have claims over. Under international law, and you could mock international law all you want. I can mock the United States and UNCLOS with the best of them. The U.S., which helped pass UNCLOS, never ratifies it. We should. Can't get 67 senators to ratify it. I don't know why, because they're worried about losing U.S. sovereignty. I understand it, but it's a ridiculous argument. You're not going to lose U.S. sovereignty or mining rights or drilling rights. It's not an argument that's worth it. However, what we're seeing now with this contention in this region, we may see it amplify and increase in other straits around the world. The Iranians are making claims over the Straits of Hormuz for years now, for decades. Now the Houthi over the Bab el-Mandeb. And again, if you see the Straits of Malacca, other key maritime choke points come under attack, that is going to impact global shipping. That impacts the world. And right now, the Houthi are impacting the West by driving freight rates up, by making shipping more expensive than it was, impacting inflation, all the things that a non-state actor should not be able to do. In the 18th, 19th century, this is piracy. We dealt with piracy with the Barbary pirates. Many nations dealt with the Barbary pirates. Many nations dealt with piracy. Romans dealt with piracy. Everyone dealt with piracy at one point. This is the 21st century piracy going on. Houthi are attacking ships, killing merchant mariners, 4 of them, sinking 2 ships, and imposing extra costs on the world. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Hit that super thanks button down below, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. If you're the Houthi, I have a 10% bonus for you if you join Patreon now. I'm just kidding. I have nothing for them. Nothing at all. Not giving you any at all. So next video is Sal, signing off.